All right. Hi. Hey, hello, welcome. This is Davin, and this is another episode of the Free Your Voice, Free Your Life podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I was sitting down to record this, thinking to myself, the most difficult part of recording this podcast for me is simply the introduction. I find myself to be so awkward and strange and weird when I sit down and just want to say hello. I just want to have a conversation. How's it going? But today, I'm not going to do what I normally do, which is record this over and over and over again until I get rolling. Today, we're just going. And this is in line with me striving to create a space or a place for authenticity, for freedom, for grace. And so I'm driving the bus and it's going, and I hope you'll jump on with me because we're going to go on a trip together that I'm just so happy to be with you for. It's been a little bit since I've dropped an episode, and that is for good reason. I've been out in the world doing some things, some of which I want to catch you up on here because in some ways this podcast is also turned into a bit of a journal, a diary. But first and foremost, this is a space where I'm so happy to connect with you around this journey towards personal growth, towards transformation, towards healing, towards change. And if singing is your primary or even secondary tool, awesome. We have that in common. This is a space and a place for the voice as an instrument, but also as a metaphor for what it means to show up in this world authentically, freely expressed. If you're not familiar with me, my life's calling, my mission, my work is to use my voice as a tool to help others find more freedom, more authenticity, more ease in theirs, and just to create and express the art, the creativity, the divinity that is within me. And I'm just on this mission to get as free as possible and to bring as many of you along as are willing to come. So thanks for being here with me. If you listened to the last episode, I shared with you some exciting things that I was about to do, and now I've done them. So I just want to catch you up on them because they were all really pretty badass. So first and foremost, I went to Crystal Bridges American Museum of Art in Bentonville, Arkansas, to bring my signature immersive sound healing experience called The Reset, theresetsoundexperience.com if you want to learn more about that. And I told you it was going to be a part of this whole weekend of activities, a festival of wellness that centered this art piece created by the singer-songwriter Jewel. And it was a wild weekend. First of all, let me just say, Bentonville, Arkansas, check it out. I mean, yeah, it is a place like no other. Small town that has had some big, famous money investors. And there's some really interesting stuff happening there in the town itself. And it's attracted some really interesting people from all over the world, really. But this museum, this Crystal Bridges Art Museum, I've never experienced anything like it. It's really at the cutting edge of how these sorts of art institutions can behave. And this whole weekend centering this piece, this drone show, I kid you not, by the artist Jewel. It was pretty magical. And I got to pretty much kick the thing off the very first night with my immersive sound experience in this beautiful space. And I had just an amazing crowd of people who I didn't know and didn't know me. And they came and they showed up and they trusted me. And we went on an adventure together into the far reaches of our minds. We vibrated our bodies and our beings. I got them to all make sound together. And then I created sound to envelop them as they lay on the floor in a posture of receiving and healing. And it was awesome. I loved it. I had such a cool time. I got to meet Jewel, which was amazing. I got to get a first glimpse at the art that she had created. I got to attend a bunch of other different talks. I learned about all sorts of things in the healing and well-being and wellness sphere as they relate to art. I met a beautiful human who wrote the book, Your Brain on Art, which I highly encourage you to check out. And there's going to be some future relationships with Susan, who wrote that book. And yeah, anyway, it was awesome. thanks for all of you that reached out and followed along. If you want to check me out on Instagram, at Davin Youngs on Instagram, you can catch some evidence of that. But really, really magical time. And I came back, and then I was home maybe for less than a week, and I flew to Portugal, where I took my improvisational singing experience, VOXUS, which I bring to professional and corporate groups. I took that to kick off a human resources summit, a global human resources summit, over 500 human resources executives from all over the world, but mainly Europe, Western Europe, some Eastern Europe, some Asia, the Middle East. Basically what I did is the very first thing they did at the summit, I got them singing. They didn't know I was going to do it. We were improvising. It was awesome. It was great. I have to say, full disclosure, I've done this in a lot of different places and spaces. I had not yet done this internationally, especially with such a diverse cultural representation in the audience. And I had some, I don't know, curiosity about what the reception would be given the different cultural norms in these, different countries, etc. But I have to say, everyone was so receptive. And it just reminds me that humans want to sing. They want to sing. Human beings want to sing no matter where they're from, no matter who they are, no matter their age, no matter their sex, no matter their gender, no matter their religion. They want to sing. They want to use their voice. They want to be connected in community. And when someone like me comes in and just writes them the quickest little permission slip to do so, they're game and they have a good time and it brings joy to their lives. And this was so reflected in this group. People came up to me afterwards just really grateful. And it's funny to be grateful at a business conference to be able to sing, but I get it. I feel it. I want more of it. I love it myself. So I walked away so affirmed and uplifted and joyful and optimistic about future opportunities, bringing VOXUS to these spaces. So yeah, grateful, looking forward to more opportunities to do that. And just really, really so enamored with the idea of communities of human beings in all spaces and places coming together and using their voices in collective song. Here in Chicago, we have Chicago Circle Singing. You can check out at chicagocirclesinging.com, which has really been blowing up. We have had 70 plus people at our monthly gatherings, and it's been so cool to witness the power of improvisational singing. And one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about improvisational singing is that you don't have to know the words. You don't have to know the music. It's all made up there on the spot. You just have to have a good leader. And I got that held down for you. So if you're in or around the Chicagoland area, I really want to invite you to check out what we're doing on a community level with this improvisational singing thing. Come join us. The more, the merrier. Or wherever you live in the world, check out to see if there are community gatherings around you. The circle singing community is global, and most major cities have a group of people that meet in some capacity. So check it out. Okay, that all happened. It has me riding high. But today I want to talk to you about specifically this idea of, it's an idea around what I see happen in a lot of people around delaying happiness, delaying joy. And I want to share something with you before I head fully down this path that is in stark contrast to everything that I just told you about. I'm very much riding high on the creative and professional opportunities that have been coming my way lately, and very much feeling the manifestations of my efforts and my labor and my trust in the universe. But I also just want to tell you that today, there's been a lot of resistance to sitting down and recording this for you because today happens to be my mom's birthday, and she died in 2021. And grief is a fascinating thing in that something like a day like this manages to just show up in my body. That's just the best way that I can describe it. And it's been interesting to move further away from the actual date of her death and feel that the power of grief has diminished. Its ability to sort of overtake me feels less significant. And while grief is, as people say, very much a part of my way of seeing the world, and it becomes integrated in who I am now, I don't feel so helpless as I did early on to the whims of grief. But it's fascinating that on a day like today, the presence of grief and sadness in my body and in my heart and in my mind and in my spirit, how it emerges and overtakes me, and how it is a practice and a duty of mine to honor that. And so I'm just naming that here for you today because I'm going to be talking a lot about choosing to engage happiness, choosing to engage joy and not putting these things off. But I'm disclosing this truth of the fact that I feel heavily grief in my heart and in my body today, so as to help you understand that this is not my way of helping you bypass the realities of how difficult it can be to be a human. And I live this. I live this every day. I live a very privileged life. I have a lot of opportunities that come my way. A lot of it, the culture sets someone up like me for certain types of successes, and I'm aware of that. But I'm a human, and I'm not immune to the trials and tribulations and the struggles of being human and what it is to experience loss and failure and frustration and sorrow and suffering. And so there's a complexity to these sorts of conversations that I just want to lead uh, with my own honesty and understanding around that. So I'm holding that as true, and I'm going to um, perhaps call reference to that various times as we talk through this more. But this conversation that I want to bring you around not delaying happiness, this comes from a couple of different places. One is it's one of these things that I have observed in so many folks I work with, so many voice clients, and just people that I'm coaching. Um, and also, it comes from a experience that I had in meditation, and also I host a weekly meditation group called Sit Club, which you can learn more about at my website, davinyoungs.com. But this was very much the theme of our most recent Sit Club gathering, and I thought I would extend that into this space because meditation has been such an essential tool for me in understanding this idea about how we relate to the complexity, the expansive happiness and joy that is available to us at any given moment. So here's what I often hear from people that I work with. Generally, someone comes to me, particularly for voice coaching, but also for coaching of other sorts, and they will have a belief about themselves that in order to get to the next place, in order to achieve the next thing, to sound better, to record that EP, to perform, you name it, to pursue the creative project, to quit their job, to change their relationship, et cetera, that they will have to get a number of ducks in a row, get a number of pieces in place. And as I've started to become more attuned to this being a part of a lot of folks' conversation when they come into relationship with me, I am able to hear that often as a protective mechanism, as a mechanism of uh, trying to attempt to create safety as their mind explores the possibility of going somewhere that feels like it's not safe. In fact, often these are ways in which the mind wants to make the process of change more difficult as a means of actually putting up barriers for change. And that change is generally thought to be a pathway to happiness, a pathway to more joy, a pathway to more freedom, a pathway to more liberation. So it kind of goes like this. Like, I'm struggling. I can't get this together on my own. I need your help to get these pieces in place. And then, and no one ever really says this explicitly, but this is the implication, and then I'll be happy. And then I'll be happy. And what I've started to realize and started to reflect back to people is that's bullshit. It's almost always bullshit. And what I want you to know, if you stopped listening right now, that in the midst of my own grief, in the midst of my own sadness about the absence of my mother and this day in which my body remembers her birthday, I want you to know that I believe that happiness is available to you here right now. That fundamental happiness is available to you here right now, right in this moment. And that you don't have to do anything to get it. In fact, you might have to stop doing everything to notice it. The thing about all those steps that you're wanting to put in the way is that it's not that they are wrong. It's not that you don't need to make some shifts, make some changes. You might need to move some things, break some habits, create new patterns. But I see it as so problematic if we think to ourselves, I just need to get my ducks in a row. And then I just need to check these things off my list. And then I'll be ready. One of the things that's so beautiful about pursuing a creative endeavor of any sort is if you get very far into it, you recognize that there's no arrival point, that you don't sing a song or finish a sculpture or offer a performance and you don't get done and go, oh, that was it. That was the one. I've succeeded. I'm done. Actually, the best case scenario is you get done with those things and you go, that wasn't it. I got to try again. There's more. There's more. There's more. There's more. That was really good. What I just did was actually really good. It was actually the best I've ever done that. And that just makes me want to do it more. What that points us toward as an experience is that this is very much a process-driven life. That there is no end point as long as we are breathing. That there is no point of arrival. And while there is self-satisfaction in gaining increased skill, there's not a moment where you go, oh, now I'm happy. Now I am. I've arrived. Here I am. Look at me. The pinnacle of happiness. But can you hold that as a paradoxical truth is alongside the fact that right now you can recognize your essential happiness, your essential being? Could you imagine that your being is at its very essence, at its very core, happy? Happy. Now, to recognize happiness, to really know happiness, we also would have had to have known suffering. They can't exist without the other. And if you're not familiar with the language of suffering, suffering is a term that you'll hear me say a lot, particularly in this sort of framework, and it actually comes from the meditation term dukkha, which is a Pali word that comes from the Buddhist meditation tradition, which translates into suffering or unsatisfactoriness. It was my experience when I first heard this word suffering that it sounded a little dramatic to me. It didn't necessarily reflect how I saw myself, but as I've gotten further down the road, I recognized that all of life is suffering to a certain extent, but you might resonate more with this term unsatisfactoriness. Like, I'm not quite satisfied. That didn't yet satisfy for me. So this recognition that so much of my experience in life doesn't satisfy, that I can have the biggest gig of my life and I can have the most people that come to it, and I can sell the most tickets, and I can feel so accomplished in what it is that I've done. But I won't walk away feeling like all of my itches have been scratched, right? I won't walk away feeling done. I'll only walk away potentially wanting more. And this is good news. In fact, this is great news because this is evolution. This is growth. This is transformation. But what so many of us do is we put so many pieces in the way before we'll even attempt to do the thing that we don't let ourselves bump up against the suffering in order to know the happiness. Now, does that make sense? We're so afraid to suffer that we don't allow ourselves to take the necessary steps toward growth. And we construct this list in our head. I've got to figure this out. I've got to do this. I have to have this skill. I have to have this much money. I have to have this much time. I see this time and 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 time again, where people come to me and they have this idea that these pieces have to be in place before they can achieve what it is that they want to achieve. And here's the thing, all of them want just to achieve happiness. We might not articulate that clearly for ourselves, and it might be worthwhile for me to actually define this term happiness. I would actually best describe happiness as the absence of suffering. Or you could define it in any way. You don't even have to commit to this word happiness. You could use peace, you could use joy, you could use ease, you could use freedom, you could use liberation. But for the purpose of today's conversation, let's just humor me and use this word happiness. And come back to this idea that happiness is that feeling that we feel when we aren't caught up in the suffering or the unsatisfactoriness of our lives. Now, I said it's the absence of suffering, but I mean that the feeling is the absence of suffering because there is no such thing as the absence of suffering, in that this world has the capacity, this universe has the capacity, you have the capacity to hold all of that simultaneously. You can sit in a day of deep grief and speak with ultimate knowing about your capacity for happiness. You can feel happiness in the midst of your grief. Or you can do your best to mute it all. You can make a million excuses why you can't experience that now. You can delay your happiness. Some people spend their whole lives doing this. And I get it, it's scary. You know, the thing about confronting the fact or the truth that you might be able to access your happiness right now is that might scare the shit out of you. Because if you were happy, if you weren't caught in the story of being miserable or not having the pieces in place in order to do X, Y, Z, if you were happy, if you knew that you were happy, how would you act? What choices would you make? What action would transpire? If you were happy, if you were fundamentally happy, how would you be in the world? How generous would you be? What would you give up? What would you pursue? What would you love? What would you say no more to? What would you say yes to? And what sort of pleasures would you stop denying yourself? This to me has been a real big light bulb in my own life, that so many people deny themselves access to pleasure because it might alert them to the unsatisfactoriness of other aspects of their lives. That it requires such a great capacity to be able to hold both as true. But we actually have a much easier time holding on to our unsatisfactoriness, our suffering. But I got to do this. I have to have this. I'm not good enough at this. I'll get better at this. We hold those as having the utmost importance and prominence. But what if we held joy, peace, patience, pleasure, generosity, grace? What if you held that as the utmost of importance in your life? How would you move throughout the world? How would you be? How would you interact with others? How would you treat others? What choices would you make for yourself? Would you stay at your job? Would you stay in your relationship? Would you live where you're living? Would you keep putting off performing? Would you sing? Would you sing? There's this beautiful poem by Mary Oliver, which you might be familiar with. It's called I Worried. And I'd like to read it to you just here briefly because it really speaks to exactly what I'm speaking about. I worried. I worried a lot. Will the garden grow? Will the rivers flow in the right direction? Will the earth turn as it was taught? And if not, how shall I correct it? Was I right? Was I wrong? Will I be forgiven? Can I do better? Will I ever be able to sing? Even the sparrows can do it, and I am, well, hopeless. Is my eyesight fading or am I just imagining it? Am I going to get rheumatism, lockjaw, dementia? Finally, I saw that worrying had come to nothing and gave it up and took my old body and I went out into the morning and sang. Oh, I just love that poem. I feel that poem so deeply in my bones. We spend so much time worrying. And you know what? It's not our fault. It's so baked into the human experience. But what I want you to know is that you have the capacity to move beyond those old stories. You have the capacity to move beyond the experiences that led you to believe that you're not good enough, that you don't have enough, that there aren't enough pieces in place, that you're too old, that you don't have enough money, that you don't have enough support. I want you to know that right here, right now, you can reject those thoughts and you can find your way in through a number of practices. Therapy, embodied somatic practices, singing, dancing, meditation, spiritual community. You can find your way in to a regular practice of understanding that happiness is available to you here right now. In fact, you will not be able to experience it fully even after you've accomplished everything, even if you've checked everything off the list. You will not be able to experience it fully then if you can't experience it fully now. Right now. It's here within you. Satisfaction is available to you in an unsatisfactory world. Joy is available to you in a time of war and sadness. Singing is available to you even when you're out of tune. Beauty is available to you in all of your surroundings. Love is available to you as the river that runs through it all. It's all here for you right now. Can you rest? Can you recognize? Can you notice? Can you receive? If you can, the action that you'll take will be so much more efficient on your path for growth. I've told you before that one of the hallmarks of change for many people is some circumstance in life that puts them in a place that questions control, permanence, mortality. You know, a lot of times people find themselves ill. They bump up against the death of a loved one, the end of a marriage, the end of a job, financial suffering. And that is the turning point in their life where they find themselves actually pursuing that which feels more like them, feels more honest, feels more true. But I've been thinking recently that is inevitable. For all of us, at some point, we will bump up against the trials and tribulations of life. And because of that, we will change. Someone you love is going to die. Something difficult is going to happen. And I say that not to be flippant, but just to say, like, this is something we all share and it's something we can all connect around. But what I'm learning to reject is that is necessary for you to create monumental change in your life. You can choose it. You can choose it before the illness. You can choose it before the financial ruin. You can choose it before the relational collapse. It requires a lot of courage, but I think that courage is best derived from the recognition of your fundamental nature as being good and joyful and happy. Again, I go back to this question. If you knew that who you are right now is someone who has access to a well of happiness, if you knew that, what action would you take? Now, I recognize for some of you listening, you might go, he doesn't know what I struggle with. He doesn't know the depression I struggle with. He doesn't know the suffering I've undergone. You're right. I don't. But I do recognize that these qualities of humanity, they're not unique to me. It's the thing that we all feel together when we come together to sing. I go back to my time in Portugal singing with the HR executives. And if I could just get you in your mind right now to imagine a room full of people in business casual clothes singing, clapping, and dancing. I mean, sure, some struggled with it, self-consciousness, fear, but the overarching look on everyone's face was happiness, smiles, joy. Now, I didn't give them any special laughing gas. I just got them to sing. I got them to reconnect with themselves. I got them to tap into one of the most primal human instincts, which is to use our voice. And you know what's even better than that? To use our voice together in community with others. And so I know that your struggle is unique to you. And I know that the situations that have brought you into this space and this place, and I know how hard you've tried to change in the past. And I'm not saying that this is an easy, quick, flip a switch sort of situation, but I want you to know that it can be as easy as starting to recognize that you've been delaying happiness, that it is accessible to you here right now. And if you start to pull back the barriers of, I have to do this, I need to accomplish this, I'm not good enough for this, I'll probably never get to this, no one else in my family has done this, none of my friends believe I can do this. If you can just start to pull away some of that and go, but it feels good, I want to do this. Even if I suck at it, even if I'm the worst at it, I want to do it right now because it feels good, because I feel good. I want to connect to pleasure. I want to connect to joy. I want to connect to a feeling of delight. What happens when you do that is you open a portal to a more expansive life. Those roadblocks, those to-do lists, those are designed to keep you with a sense of safety, but ultimately feeling so small. You might feel safe if you show up to every conversation and you go, well, I know how this plays out. This goes like this. Yeah, well, I can't do that yet. I got to get, my kids have to graduate first. Or I have to make this much money and it's got to be in the bank. I'm not negating any of the realities of your responsibility, but I want you to hear yourself when you say those things, because I hear you. I hear you. Heard everyone this week that sat down with me and said, I have to do this, or yeah, but this, yeah, but this, but this, but this, but this, but this, what about this? Oh gosh. I hear you. I respect that narrative. I hear that story. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's not true. It's not true. It's not true. It's an evolutionary protective mechanism. It's your nervous system's way of trying to keep you safe. And what I want you to know is that if you travel down the path of happiness, it might cause you to feel wild at first. It might cause you to feel not like you're on a roller coaster without the seatbelt on. But I want you to know that the thrill is liberating and freeing. And that if you can open up to that, if you can move beyond thinking that you have to control how the earth turns on its axis. I love that image from the Mary Oliver poem, that she's like, what if the world stops spinning and how can I fix it? That's how we feel, right? There are wars in the world. How much more helpless could I be? I should be able to do something. These are worthwhile things to explore in our mind, but ultimately, the thing you can do the most with is live your life with love. Live your life with joy. Live your life with freedom. Live your life with authenticity. Build relationships on the premise that you are a happy, joyful person. Stop delaying your happiness. It's here. It's right now, in the midst of your grief, in the midst of your depression, in the midst of your sorrow, just even here for a millisecond, there is happiness. And if you continue to pursue it, you will make beautiful things. You will create beautiful, beautiful things that are so of you. If you record your album finally, with the curiosity and the joy of being someone who happily makes music, someone who loves to make music. If you write that book through the lens of curiosity and happiness, not as someone who is a slave to their art, but as someone who has the privilege to create, even though they might not be great at it. If you do that, you are setting up so many others for success because you're living energetically out in the world in a way that the culture does not encourage. You must have achieved this. You must look like this. You must make this. Nope, it's not true. It's a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. My friend, stop delaying happiness. Stop it. Stop it right now. And if you need support along the way, you got me here cheering you on, and a lot of other people out in the world that are seeking to do the same thing. All right. I appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out with me. We'll be back at it soon. Peace.